hear me fine? Yeah, perfect. Right at the back as well. Brilliant. After the coffee break, so I'm mindful. I'm going to try and keep you all attentive. And if I'm speaking too fast, let me know. I can slow down. It's a pleasure to be back in Morocco, Rabat. I was here in 2019, so it's almost 5 years since I'm back here. So it's amazing to be back. Talking a little bit about financial technology in the UK, the landscape. So you heard from the previous keynote speaker, Samir, about financial technology and principles behind how technology and financial sort of industries come together. Very philosophical, so the artistic approach, it was really nice. I'm going to talk a little bit about financial technology from a global, but from a UK context. So that's the key thing that I'll spend maybe around 30 minutes talking about the landscape, opportunities, the challenges, and also what you can do to tackle that together. Okay, so that's the whole purpose of my talk. But before that, so that's what the key agenda items will be, just to go through, right? All the way from what the topic area is. I'll cover that very shortly. A little bit about myself, not too much. Thanks to AI, that's my avatar there. So yeah, my research background in academia, I started in technology and management. I love business, I love technology, so all the work that I do is evaluation of technology, so I don't take the right or the wrong, I question it, the evaluation, so I look at the cost, I look at the benefits, opportunities, I work with a lot of European Commission funded projects, and that's the role that I play, evaluate technology use, right? And all the way from how that has an impact on society. I also run a business school now for Kingston University London. I started at Bradford School of Management in the North in the UK. I started as their dean in 2019. I started as a postdoc researcher, so after my PhD at University in London in 2014 and 2019 I got into management of running business schools in the UK, and this is my second one in Kingston University London. I started in September. So that's a little bit from the management side. I still love research, I still do it, but also I like to think about new programs, new research areas. How does the faculty sort of work? I also keep myself active in outside academia, so a little bit on sort of public bodies like the Chartered Association of Business School helps me learn. I'm not stuck in a bubble, but so it's always good to know what the sector does, so outside perspective as well. And I come from Sri Lanka, so I come from a family business background. I love business, simple business, no technology, buy, sell. That's what I come from. So, and now I'm in the business school world. So that's a little bit about myself. So I'll go through the global risks and fintech. So I'm going to start a little bit about not fintech. I'm going to talk about a little bit of the society and what we are faced with. Right? And I think it's important because that has an impact on financial technology, it has an impact on you and how you sort of work around. I think it's important we just reflect. I always like to take a step back and think about what you, the businesses, government organizations, politics, what does it have to do with us as society? Right? So, have you heard of the World Economic Forum? I'm sure you might have heard of it. They do a risk report every year. This is the latest one published in January called the Global Risk Report because it informs policymakers, businesses, organizations, consumers like us to think about it. Look at that top 3 risks that you and I face, right? Organizations face. And last year, okay, your number 1 risk, if you see in the perception, is conflict. Conflict between states, organizations, and you see the world we live. And that has an impact on the finances, has an impact on everything that we do. So, and to navigate that, how do we actually work around it? Extreme weather conditions, like last 2 years, and this is a short-term risk. And this wasn't the case. It's not just about climate change, it's about actual extreme weather conditions, right? Dubai having a flood in like years. So how does the organizations, insurance companies all deal with this, the economic impact of it? Geoeconomic confrontation, yeah, different sort of views and political viewpoints, that has an impact on society. AI, you love it or you hate it, but that creates a lot of misinformation and disinformation, right? How do you navigate what's right or wrong? And all of those are the big ticket items that would have not been the case before, right? So it's important for us to reflect on it, and that's amazing. Sort of every year they just keep doing this, and this changes. Next 2 years, short term, like I said, your number one risk we all have to face and navigate is misinformation and disinformation because of technology, right? AI is a big contributor, social media is a big contributor. How do you know what information you receive is right or wrong? And that state of affair, the societal polarization, right? You have different viewpoints in society, and that also creates different political viewpoints, societal impact it has, businesses, organizations. I always like to think of this because this is connected. We are in a connected world. Everything that we do, and if you see this sort of map, you're just a high-level viewpoint, right? Everything that I've talked about, technology, financial, it has an impact on our life. I think that's an important point for us to reflect. And the blue spots are the economic impact, and you will see how that impacts fintech. I'll show you, right? Green are the environmental. You have the orange sort of hotspots as geopolitics, because you can have inflation, your cost of living has an impact on how you spend, right? So, and the debt and how governments are actually trying to be efficient. US, right? They don't want borrowing, and then you can go bankrupt. Sri Lanka had that same thing. So how do you actually really think about economic impact, geopolitics, technology impact, and that has an impact on us as consumers? So keep that in mind, and now I'm going to switch over to how that has a role to play in financial technology. So this is the global fintech investment. So it was by Innovate Finance. They did a big study on how much investment is being made in financial technology. And Samir explained fintech really nicely, set the scene. It has a lot of industries all the way from banking, insurance, it has lending. So fintech or financial technology is a broad term, right? So all the products that we have, your wallets, your credit cards, and everything contributes to this. But can you see how it's booming and then falling down as well? It doesn't mean that it will sort of take that same trend, but it shows, right, there's a decline in confidence, there's lack of money, venture capitalists, VCs, able to fund your startups, your unicorns, right, to boost innovation. So, and like I said, how 2020, you know, the big, after 2019, COVID happened, there was still confidence in people to invest in innovation. What did COVID do? People go remote, online, right? So that made that innovation come to accessibility around financial services and accessibility to how people, they have to reach population that they couldn't have reached, right? So you immediately saw that rise in financial technology, like 2008. Banking crisis also saw that. So when there is challenges, there's opportunities. Yeah? So it's important to note that as well. It also means that then you put in your own challenges with political viewpoints, but also it means when cost of living rises, inflation rises up, you also don't want to invest so much, right? That's where the macroeconomics has a play, and that's important. That's the global landscape. In the UK, no dissimilar. Right? No dissimilar in the UK. There's a lot of confidence as well after 2021. The capital investment, and this is recent data, yeah, until 2024. There was a resilience post-pandemic. I think it's purely because people had no choice but to expand and reach all the accessibility for financial tech. But early stage funding came up, new innovations, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the innovations that came up. But there has been a recent decline, and that's because of macroeconomics, right? All the way away from rising interest rates, borrowing, lending, cost of living. People don't want to just invest. So that's important for us, and that's why I think the risk of society plays a part in every sector, be it in education, be it in the financial world. In the UK, so however, from an European context, UK is still there. It's leading the way in terms of actual fintech and innovation and investments. Right? Investments in the UK is dropped by 25% almost, right? So that's a number of deals being made in investing in unicorns, but also there has been a decline in actual sort of startups coming through, right? UK still remains an European fintech leader, raising a lot of money at the moment, but comparative to France, Germany, Switzerland, Netherlands, they all declined. The UK still has around 600 billion, sort of 6 billion sort of investments that's happening as we speak. Home down, and this is the UK actual landscape, so it's a global leader at the moment, right? Number two, first is US. US has the biggest sort of front end, and you're not surprised, I'm not surprised, but for a 60 million population country, as opposed to the US, it's still, I think, leading, and that comes through financial services, knowledge economy in the UK being very strong, the soft power. Right? We are not an industrial manufacturing like China or India to sort of capitalize it. UK relies on R&D, research and innovation, financial services, professional services, so they still have that sort of, let's say, leverage to be able to capitalize that. However, with a caveat, because lots of people are also turning, because regulations and innovation can also stifle innovation, so there's a bit of caution for us to think about. These are the big city sort of areas, all the way from London being the capital, but there's lots of work being done in the north of the region as well, Leeds, Edinburgh, so there's lots of work that is happening wider, which is also promising, because you don't want, from a country perspective, you don't want just all your knowledge being stuck in one, right? And that creates a disparity from source of accessibility. And the key sectors, digital banking, and I'll show you what the trend is within InsurTech or wealth, where the UK is actually spreading, but you will see lots of work is being done in actually lending, banking, financial services or insurance, and that's where sort of key areas are. But 10% of the global fintech unicorns are based in the UK, so not bad. They're not really that bad, but I think there's still a bit of caution because there are some movements of UK fintech companies, large ones, going and listing not in the UK stock exchange but in the US. That creates a problem. Here's the difference in the UK. So the fintech specializing, they've only got data till 2020, but it gives you an immediate sense of where the spread of their services are within the broad financial technology umbrella. Right? So you have the yellow line, it's all about lending. Right? All your fintech services are going into lending, and that's where the services are going. Then you have your RegTech, regulation technologies being sort of created. You have your wealth management or wealth tech, the black line, right? How do you actually, and fintech has been really helpful actually, because before, all your wealth management has been big, large banks, and you had to have a, let's say, minimum deposit of 100,000. Fintech broke that. You can go, just like regular users, £100, £200, and you can choose to be smart investments. So it has created accessibility in that. But our biggest one is lending, and then you have RegTech and WealthTech, and everything else comes, even banking is a bit below that. Are you all keeping on track? Does it make sense? Right? All the way from the global fintech and where we are going, and how the UK is positioning itself. These are some of the types of businesses or, let's say, organizations, companies who are top sort of in different ways. Their market capitalization and they were investing. I've chosen the top 6, right? And different types what they do. You have checkout.com, which is really a shopping cart sort of style payment services. So that's one of your biggest, and they were founded in 2012. 1.8 billion raised, right? So there's a big demand for it. Revolut, have you heard of Revolut? Your bank, online neo banking, right? Just like TransferWise and everything. And they're doing really well, right? They were founded in 2015, so not far off. And they have a 1.7 billion raising funds. You have Wise, payment Yeah, transfer exchange, you all know these brands, right? And they're doing really well. SumUp is also similar for payments, digital payment. So they've broken down sort of your traditional sort of your small businesses to be able to have SumUp. Now you see everywhere, even in a market trade, you will have your immediate, or you even in taxis, you can pay by contactless payment, right? So that's SumUp. Lend Invest, it's about investing capital, and Prodigy Finance, more finances. So these are sort of a variety of top UK sort of firms, organizations or businesses, and where the investment and where money is being pumped by the venture capitalists. So that just gives you a sign of the types of businesses operating in the fintech world in the UK. There's many more, but these are sort of key topics. So that gives you a really good sense of how fintech has evolved from a global investment perspective to the UK sort of landscape. Now let's look at some of the innovations happening within that, be it blockchain or AI. So these are the top 5 innovations shaping UK fintech, right? A big thing, and this is happening in Morocco and other countries as well, open banking, right? Third party providers, and it's breaking up sort of your traditional way of banking systems, right? APIs, application protocol interfaces, giving access to, and that was never the case before. And now, because of open banking, you're getting a lot of rival banks coming up with low cost to be able to just purely be technology based to be able to set up no physical infrastructure at all, and to be able to do that, I think is amazing. Embedded finance, right? All the services are being integrated in non-financial services. China was the best for this. Remember, they had like WhatsApp, they had WeChat, and they integrated sending money, paying money, everything in one shot. Right? And they were at the forefront. Now others are trying to do it, but I think it's important to think about embedded financial services. And then you have your typical AI, machine learning, personalized services to financial. I think that's a big revolution that's happening. And then you have your digital assets and crypto, right? Huge Bitcoin and assets and everything comes in. There's a lot of confidence now. How different states are reacting to it, and regulation before it was uncertain, but a lot of the governments are backing it, right? So that's going to be a big ticket item. Digital identity, Sankar was talking about, digital assets is going to be all linked, they're all connected. And I think this is another thing, and recent announcement by the UK government was to work with US and UK to look at regulations for crypto assets. So that shows that there's going to be policy level interest, and that will open up a new sort of innovation firms and organizations, and everyone's trading Bitcoins and assets, but it's beyond. Yeah, Bitcoin is important, but it's beyond that. It's digital assets, and crypto assets is going to be really a key thing because policymakers are backing it. And then you have your generation change, right? Your generation Z, who love organizations who are responsible, who are thinking about sustainability agenda. Where does your money get invested in? Is it oil and gas? Or is it going to military, war? People are questioning it. As generations changes, they're challenging that. And there is the ethical social governance, ESG. I think there is a big trend. So those are your big 5 ticket items that has an impact on the UK, or let's say fintech. Not just in the UK, but at least there's a trend that's going to happen. I'll take one trend and deep dive into, show you how that has an impact. Open banking, right? That's a big one, because that's, you will see on the right hand side, your traditional banking, that's how it works, right? You have your bank here, and then you go straight to the customer. And then you introduce the third party providers, TPPs, right? Because of APIs and everything else that you can do with them. And that has really liberated the banking world, right? Giving access and coming up with innovations within that, but being able to challenge your very monopolistic traditional big banks and building societies. In the UK, there's 9 big banks and building societies. They call it the CMA 9, Competitive Market Authority. They are the biggest alliance. So big 9 banks, the UK control most of it. And then you bring in your Revoluts. They're disrupting the whole because of open banking. Look at that, right? 13.3 million users, 40% growth, right? 4.1 billion ecosystem, right? In terms of economic value, 5K fintech jobs. That's your CMA 9 I was talking about compliance and moving to a smart data era. The whole notion about financial payments. Before, there was the whole fixed term direct debit payments, right? You can't change. Now they're looking at variability. What if 1 month your bill, electricity bill is £100, but the next month it needs to drop? Can you bring in innovation to change that direct? So the variable payment systems is going to be a big thing. And then there's also going to be challenges within that, right? Uptake versus cards. If you want to go from cashless economy, right? Is the society ready? Is the infrastructure ready? So all of that is going to come out, and there will be some delays within that, and how people adapt, right? But not just the technology, but confidence, trust in coming and using unknown sort of, let's say, new disruptor, right? So I think that's important for us to think about. And from open banking, I also go about regulations. I think regulators have a huge role to play. Just like in Morocco, the regulators have a role to play. How does regulation not stifle innovation? And the Financial Conduct Authority, the UK, is the UK's authority body in terms of regulating, and they are trying to innovate. They call something called the sandbox. How do you invite sort of new startups or unicorns, large organizations to work together and create the safe environment to try and do new things, the experimentation, right? So they launched in 2016 Sandbox that was sort of inviting people to come and experiment, test innovation in products, services, any new business models, live market. So that was something really good, but they can also have oversight. So you don't lose that oversight. So it's a controlled testing, it's flexibility in regulation so they can rethink their existing regulations and policies, and then also supporting innovation. So I thought that was quite cool. And in the recent year, 700 applications, by having the regulations having an open mind, governments having an open mind to experiment, try and taste, but also protect consumers. We don't want to lose the consumers in this. Over 700 applications since the launch. So that invited people to come and test. Fail, doesn't matter. But you had oversight as a government. So you still have some control, but I think it's important that they reflect, right? Fast to the market time, right? How quickly can you get into the market? And that was quite impressive. And then that inspired other sandboxes, other let's say countries. Now the US and UK is sort of working together to try and innovate for crypto assets. So that's, I think, is important to learn lessons, but also influence other organizations or other countries as well. And the recent one is with AI and superpower, Nevada, right? Everyone knew NVIDIA for chips and gaming, and they're giving the superpower, computing power to be able to think about more financial services. So that's the digital sandbox from 2016. They launched the normal sandbox regulation. In digital sandbox in 2020, they started to think about it. So I think regulators, that's a call for thinking about it. That was regulation. You saw a little bit about the trend, open banking, and now just one organization, startup, Monzo. Have you heard of Monzo? So some of you might be, it's like a Revolut, it's a bank, a neo bank, right? Competitors to your traditional bank, no physical assets, just pure. And look at their sort of growth trajectory. Look at the number of users in 2018 when they launched, and now they are dominating the UK banking sort of world, online banking world, right? And there are innovations within that. 12 million users, 1.2 billion revenue, right? And they have now, they're expanding different services within, and they're also going to business to business and pensions in the UK. So quite smart in that. They've been working very there. Recently, they have had regulatory scrutiny. They were fined recently purely because they took high risk business and they were lending too many things in terms of customers, so FCA fined them recently as well. But there is so a big, in terms of startups or innovations that's happening in terms of fintech, the biggest, let's say, lesson learned for most of it is how do you comply to regulation. Yeah? And they are looking at going public now. So it's a good success story, but they have had their challenges, and mainly driven by regulation, right? And falling foul to it. Good. So that was the innovation landscape, right? What's happening in the UK, sort of innovation. I'm just going to spend a little time on the challenges and risks and opportunities, and then I will close it. Are we all okay? Are we all good? Yeah, perfect. Right. Couple of challenges, and this will apply to Morocco, it will apply to most of the places, like I said, even the big guys or the big guns who are really doing well, like Monzo. Regulatory uncertainty is the biggest challenge that you will see, right? Changes in rules, new technology comes, governments are really hesitant, how do you actually navigate that? They don't keep up as fast as technology moves, right? Policy takes time. You debate, you discuss, you have to, so that's your biggest complexity, but also challenge. Then you have talent shortage, right? Do you have the people, the skill sets, right, who are able to, one is who don't understand what blockchains are, or AI or ML is going to be, right? So it's the same challenge even the banks have, but in the startup world, right, your big talents go to the large banks, job security. They don't come up to startups unless you create that environment. Then you have your big cyber security threats, right? That's your biggest threat, regardless even if you're in financial technology, in education world or anywhere. You're investing in cyber security. Our own university, a big cyber security team. 10 years ago, no cyber security team. So there is a huge risk about cyber security, and that even your biggest, largest organizations like your supermarkets, Waitrose, this is like the brands in the UK are like a Carrefour in Europe. Big ransoms. And this is recent, very recent. They've hijacked and they're not able to even do anything. So cybersecurity is like one of the biggest threats. Then you have your economic and macroeconomic pressures, like I talked about. I think it's important to think about all the way from cost of living, inflation, I don't know, in terms of lending. So all of that has an impact on how do you actually operate and grow, and public trust. If it's a new brand, new sort of type of service, no one wants to buy in immediately, right? As opposed to your traditional where they have the physical infrastructure, there's privacy concerns that come up with it. And that's your sort of landscape that the fintech world also faces. And then, and also the pressures from sustainability, and if you are not sort of really a responsible organization, you're not willing to sort of adapt them. Yeah? So challenges doesn't mean opportunities. Yeah, it's important to think about the opportunities. And these are some of the key ticket opportunities that in the fintech world will have. Financial inclusion, the biggest one. Like I said, 2019, COVID struck. They needed to reach all the population. That created innovation to be. But also regions where you are not able to go and sort of have access, right, to organizations. So I think the financial inclusion, the wealth management is a classic case. Before, you're only able to invest in, if you had a minimum, let's say £100,000, you can invest now with little less £100. So that financial inclusion is absolutely, if you can think of innovation and services to bring everyone together, perfect. B2B, business to business infrastructure is going to grow up. I think banking as a service, it's going to be big. So really look out for that. It's because of APIs, creating access, third-party providers, they're all speaking to each other, right? There are now mobile apps that bring in multiple banks in one place. Never used to be the case. So the more you get the democratization or the liberal sort of factor, it's going to come up with more innovation which you might not even think about, right? Startups building tools about carbon tracking, innovation in lending, where does your money go when you have wealth management, and to be able to show the transparency through blockchain or whatever it is, where your money is being invested, and that's going to have power because your generation is expecting that. Generation Z, Generation Alpha wants organizations to be responsible. The last three set of opportunities, Gen AI, right? Forget AI, Gen AI to agentic AI, that's going to revolutionize the key things. If you can risk model, right? Predicting insurances, how do you actually risk model? Do you want to lend to someone? It might be personalized, it might have its dark sides, but I think it's going to create much more insight for consumers to be able to do it, right? They want a personalized service, right? You want to know how your money is being spent in your banking app. You want to create savings, right? Can you spend £20 less but you create savings? That's all coming from insights about tracking your usage, yeah? The patterns. Payment leak, Cross-border is going to be even more. International payment remittance and transfer of money. And that cross-border leadership of being able to navigate not just your own policies and UK government, but the other countries' government's regulations. That's complex. And to be able to operate in that even better. And there's a little bit in the UK, this is very specific. How do you also access the small businesses rather than large organizations? How do you give them the ability? And sum up, I think like even if you're using a cab, if you can create them to think about fintech services even better. So democratization and accessibility to small businesses, not just your large organizations. Final slide. And this is my call for action based on the opportunities, the risks and the challenges the financial tech world works. Innovate, but innovate responsibly. Right? Think about the ethics behind it in terms of regulations. It's important that we work together to serve the society, the consumers, so they build trust. That's important, building consumer trust. Otherwise, no tech for any business service will fail. Right? If ChatGPT was able to get in 2 months the amount of users, the others, it was, no, people wanted to experiment, but also somehow they wanted to build trust. Embrace collaboration, I mean mainly for policymakers, regulators to work with businesses and organizations to think and not stifle innovation, but create sandbox environment to try, right? That's where new ideas come. And then that actually helps prepare the future for the tech firms. Good, on that note, I shall thank you all. Thank you for being very patient and listening to me, but I hope that was helpful.
Thought-provoking presentation. Thank you so much for your presentation, the quality of the slides, the quality of the references, what you cited, the numbers, and all. I'll begin the questions by asking my own and then inviting the attendees to ask. I will have 3 questions maximum, okay? So, as we've seen together, the drop of the numbers in one of your graphs is really cool for financial technology or fintech. From a perspective of a business maybe owner, manager, and a researcher and technology management or managing technology, how would you advise the new generation that are more going for autonomous businesses and they are having a very different perspective of life and work, etc. So they are more interested in investing in the technology in general. How would you advise them in this such an uncertain environment and market?
Good question. I think I always reflect on this, and some countries are doing it, right? With AI. Knowledge is power. Knowing, education, digital literacy is important. Absolutely important. You can only challenge something around I don't know how to use of AI or whatever. It's domain knowledge. If you don't know the domain knowledge, you won't be able to challenge it or know how to use it. The same level of, I would say, in terms of knowing what you're trying to get into. You get all the youngsters these days on blockchain, trading, everything. I think there's a lot of, don't stop it. But if you see, it's educating how to actually trial it, use it, the better. I think knowledge is power. So for me, I think digital literacy in terms of whatever it's been, that's why I think our job as educators should be around, okay, can we think about fintech and trading? How do you responsibly trade? There are environments for you to do that, Bloomberg trading in that sense. So I think absolutely critical. That's why do you think China has introduced school-level curriculum on AI for your school kids? Right? And that's where it's important because otherwise you're not going to stop them from getting exposed to it. How do you educate them to know what's the right versus the wrong? So for me, I think that's important because you're not going to stop your youngsters from trading blockchain or going and investing in something. There are a responsibility to financial firms because they are creating new services like say banking for children. Right? So there are actual responsibility for organizations to create products that are safe, but equally as society, it's our job to learn and educate ourselves before you try and fail. Yeah?
Thank you so much for your answer. Your answer provoked more questions in my brain.
Yeah.
I'll pop in there, but I'll stop myself from asking the questions. Maybe we'll chit chat during the line. So inviting the attendees to ask a question. And we have a question over there. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Professor Sankar, for your precious representation. I will be a little sneaky because we said only 3 questions, but I have 2 for you. How do we ensure, first question is, how do we ensure that AI in finance will remain ethical and understandable for average consumer? This is my first question. The second one is, do you think that UK will maintain its position as a global fintech leader, especially in the face of rising innovation from Asia and North America?
Your second question, you'll have to repeat it, but I'll answer the first one and then you'll repeat my second question and then I'll go. That's a $1 million question, but anyway, I think ethics in AI and responsible, there is a rule for this. Everyone is trying to have remove the black box layer, right? Being explainable, but not everyone understands it. Even if you try and explain it to them, they might not understand it. This is where regulation has a role to play, policymakers have a role to play. There's a governance structure. Governance is the key word. How do you create something that protects users like us, build confidence, but also not stop the innovation, right? There was the Elon Musk of the day. He said, if you do, you have to not lose this control, or you have to have a governance. Otherwise, you will have the dark side and the bright side of how technology is being used. Responsible AI as a policy is a big thing in some of the, let's say, European sort of laws at the moment. That helps you bring in some confidence, but there's always a block, there's always a loophole. People will look at loopholes to sort of break it. So it's not an easy answer. I think the responsibility lies within regulators, policymakers to have a good governance model. Organizations have a role to play in building responsible products, right? Do they create algorithms that bait you into investing more? That's not responsible, right? So it's about thinking that mindset. And then we have educators have to also try and train people to think about how do you know the domain knowledge. So no shortcuts. So fundamentals of knowledge is important. And then giving the ability for our students to be able to try and fail. I don't know, you try, fail, doesn't matter, but you learn. Okay? Second question, very quickly.
Okay, thank you. Well, now, as you know, UK is the leader when we are talking about. Okay, thank you. Okay. But do you think it will? Do you think that it will maintain its position, facing Asia and North America?
Look, never be complacent is what I say. You saw the trend, right? The day you think you are the leader, that's when you start falling. You have to innovate. China will take over you like that. DeepSeek or AI really something they came up with DeepSeek. Absolutely, I think UK has a very strong hold in knowledge economy, soft power, research and innovation. They need to keep at it, investing in R&D from macroeconomic policies. Investing in R&D is absolutely critical for UK to remain up there. They are trading off at the moment because you don't know where, you know, only a limited amount of pot. So they're investing in military, defense. So it's about getting the right balance to not lose sight on R&D to be able to move forward. But good question. Good. Any other questions?
We still have other questions there.
Good. Yes.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. I have two topics, not real question, but 2 reflections. How to gain trust in these technologies? Do you have an example when a consumer can protect his rights by regulation with a fintech company? Let's say a fintech company did something bad and the consumer sued the company, and do we have a real example in real life? Does that is happening in real life? Second topic, the future of fintech. Does fintech is just a tool to facilitate services like exchanges, or you spoke about China, they they don't use physical money anymore. So is this the future of fintech, replacing physical exchanges? And there's risks, you know, in your daily life to do that in your society. So that's the two reflections.
Thank you. So I'll take the first one. So the question about how much trust you can have on financial technology services if something goes wrong. So the example I can give in the UK, which relates to cyber crime, I think it doesn't necessarily need to be financial technology. Everyone gets scammed these days, especially with the rise of UK, right? You get phishing, phishing, right? So they pretend to be something, they said it's really emergency, they send you an email, you have $100,000 today, come and claim it, and people fall to it, right? When you do fall to it, right, they are transferring money, right? Financial services, they're giving it to ransomware, only organization ransomware. So there is a good example where there is a regulation now in the UK. If you do fall foul of scam, right, if you're able to evidence it, let's say you lost £100, right, or £300, someone has spent it. The bank has full responsibility to investigate and immediately reimburse the customer. So that gives you trust, like you are protected about cybercrime, like scam. But it's a UK government regulation where the ownership and accountability lies in the bank to do the investigation, but the consumer doesn't lose out immediately. So that builds in more confidence, and then you know at least you're protected in that way, right? There's lots of risk mitigation. If you go and use your credit card overseas, you get an alert, you get a call. So that's where the ownership lies in, and that's because of UK government regulations that play a part. So that hopefully gives you a real example of how fintech and there's lessons to be learned, right? How that can protect consumers to build that trust. The second one around future of fintech, again about physical versus digital, cashless economy. I think it'll happen as a transition, right? India was a classic case where they made demonetization. It was by the government, right? They brought in overnight, take off all the cash, and there was a lots of hurdles as well because your small businesses never knew what this was. So, but it can happen through top-down policy sort of regulations if it does. What I heard in Morocco, next year, you all are looking at moving away from cash payments and going to, if I'm correct, I don't know, but looking at sort of digital payments. So I think it will need the level of policies, government regulations to really enforce that if you are going to go for a cashless economy. But more and more, I think cash is also expensive for businesses and organizations to manage and maintain. So if the infrastructure is ready, I think there will be society buying in. Yeah?
All right, thank you so much for the answer. We have two other questions, and these are the final ones, please, because we still have another keynote session.
Okay, firstly I want to thank you for your insightful presentation. So I will follow up my colleague question. So what do you think, since Morocco is really working on the digital transformation, one of the things they are working on is the payment systems. So from your experience, what do you think, like the core infrastructure, necessity, Morocco should work on, and also how you see this progress till now?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For payment, peer-to-peer payment or systems around that, I think the biggest trend which I spoke about is open banking and APIs, right? So, okay, you have your open financial banking systems and your infrastructures. I think the biggest thing is going to be around open banking, think about regulations to be able to enable peer-to-peer lending. Tech, of course, you need, I think that's important, but open banking and the trust to building third-party providers is going to be critical for us. And then you have your cross-border legislations and thinking about it, because that also matters. If you're looking at the domestic, it's fine, but if you're taking international, even more complicated. But open banking and API is critical.
So do you think by 2030 we will be really I know it's a tough prediction, but just from your experience.
Look, I think it really depends on, I'll use one example of the UN SDG goals. 2030 you want to meet targets by this. You need to have an ambitious target. 2030 you want to get in, even if you meet 100% halfway, it's better. We rather have an ambitious target than a lazy target, is what I say. Right? Lazy target, you'll always be there. Right? Have an ambitious target, even if you get halfway out, you've done better. Yeah?
Let's just carry on with the final question. Thank you so much.
Hi, Sankar. Thanks for your presentation. I have just a question. In UK, as you know, fintech companies are companies that are selling services. So we can consider fintech as a service. So we can export it and import it, right? So in UK, since there is a lot of laws, lots of regulatories in fintech, when you import or export a service like this, how things happen in UK? Thank you.
Good question, actually. That's where the real complexities come in. So the biggest complexity, and it's a good thing as well, they're heavily regulated. That means that people don't want to try it. The good example that I would use is the sandbox they introduced, right? Where they were able to replicate different scenarios, cross-border payments, in an oversight by the policymakers and to help innovation happening. So even in 2016, when they introduced the sandbox, it was little big players, but it's expanded. 700 odd innovations that have happened. 2020, they moved to a digital sandbox to be able to do that. I think sandbox is the right way because 15 other countries now adapted the same model. So sandboxing would be a safe environment with oversight to be able to trial new innovations in payments or international payments because they are complicated. Now the biggest one is recent one in January, they just announced is the US and the UK for crypto assets. So I think that's how I would say the model or environment to create learnings for each country. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sankar. As I said, it's thought-provoking, and if I invite more, they will ask a question. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
For the quality of the presentation.
Thank you.